Howdy. I know I never make these long format videos. And I know I said I don't know, like several months ago that I was going to make them more often. But considering the fact that I never really made them, doing them ever is more often than not. So I wanted to make this video because I wanted to talk about kind of what I do as far as my training. I'm not training for anything in particular, right? I don't compete. I don't powerlift. I don't bodybuild. I don't do anything for competition's sake. It's all literally just to be stronger, to be healthy, to increase my quality of life. As a man, I want to be strong. I want to be capable. I want to be capable of, more than just looking good. I want to be strong. I want to be able to protect weak people, or people who need help. My job as a nurse, it's important to keep myself healthy. A lot of unhealthy nurses out there. Kind of makes it difficult to tell your unhealthy patients they need to be healthier if you yourself are not healthy. So a lot of my training, a lot of what I do is geared around just being healthier, or the healthiest that I can be. You can't live forever, but you can increase the enjoyment of life by decreasing the things that take away from that enjoyment, chronic inflammation, doing things that affect your sleep, which in turn affects your testosterone, or it affects your hormone balance in general. It can cause diabetes. It can cause heart disease. It's really awesome to lift heavy, but if you just go balls to the wall all the time and don't give yourself the proper rest, the proper recovery, you ain't going balls to the wall anymore. That ain't gonna happen. You gotta recover. So, I focus on training hard, but I focus on recovering even harder if I can, right? So I do all the healthy, crazy things that people talk about. Like I do cold plunges. I take adaptogens, right? I don't do steroids because they're expensive as crap, and everything I've ever heard of, even TRT, like everything I've ever heard about people getting on it, it's like once you get on it, you don't ever want to get off of it. And before I was a nurse, I was a history major. I was even, working my several jobs as a waiter. I even took a job as a substitute teacher and taught history and science, or, really wherever I was needed. But, my specialty was in history. And the crazy thing is, you look back at the Spartans and the ancient Greeks, and those men, they were just so physically capable of being badass without any exogenous hormones, right? It's just all diet, and they were out in the sun all the time, and they trained all the time, right? And they probably slept amazingly, right? A lot of it's speculative, but still. And like Leonidas was like 70 years old when he fought at the Battle of Thermopylae. Or not the Battle of Thermopylae, excuse me, at the Hot Gate, right? Just crushing the Persians at 70. And we got 70-year-olds now who can't even find their dick anymore. It's because they got like just all these chronic diseases that are super avoidable, you know? Like, anyway. So I thought of stuff like that, and I thought, man, what can I do to naturally get myself as close to that as possible? So again, it's all about mitigating inflammation. It's not all about it, but that's a huge part, right? You know, my training, I train without a belt, and people are like, you're going to hurt your back. There's a spinal fusion later on waiting to happen. And it's like, no, it's not. I deadlift perfectly fine. Never had back issues, you know. You got to focus on having good form. You got to focus on timing your lifts. You know, you can't deadlift. Most people wouldn't be able to deadlift every single day for very long, you know, at such a huge intensity and not see deleterious effects, right? I'm not saying you can't deadlift, period, every day. You know, there's lots of people who squat every day, and it's awesome for them, you know, but they're not maxing out every day. They're not doing max reps or max 1 rep max every day. This is not happening, right? But they are going in and they're squatting. You know, one day they'll go in and they'll do a squat workout using 85% or 90%, or they may work up to 1 rep max. I mean, most of the time, if you do it right, that's something you do like once or twice a year. But most of the time, they're going in, they're working with like 65%, 75% sub-maximal reps, you know, like considerably sub-maximal, for probably like 50% of max reps with less than 80% or, you know, 75 to 85% of their max, right? That's the best way to do these things. To get huge, you have to lift heavy within tons of intensity. But to maximize the intensity, you got to recover from it. You know, I mean, if you hop on the sauce, your recovery is through the roof, right? But if you're a natty like me, you got to do everything you can to maximize recovery, other than obviously injecting exogenous sources of hormones into your body. You know, that's why you see these people on juice. That's why they can train so hard all the time. So much harder than a natural person, because their recovery is insane. But if you're a natty, you have a huge disadvantage, at least in that regard. You know, and obviously you have a disadvantage in the muscle building and then in the strength gain regard, right? So anyway, so what do I do? Let's get to that. It's been about 8 minutes into this video, and I have not even talked about what I do. I've just kind of given you an overview of how I think about these things. Well, I like to train heavy. Obviously, on deadlift, I go rather heavy. I do everything beltless, and it's not because I think belts are useless. I use a belt. I use it on overhead and on squat usually. That's pretty much the only times I do use them. With deadlift, I've just never really liked using a belt. I don't know if it's the belts that I've used or the positioning. I've tried, you know, putting the belt up higher. I've tried it a little bit lower. I've tried it in between. I just don't like it, right? I've never had any back pain from deadlifting without a belt. And in fact, I love the fact that I can deadlift over 600 pounds beltless, because there's not a lot of people who can do that. Not at my body weight, which is right around 200 pounds. I'm not saying that you wouldn't be able to name people who can. I'm just saying you wouldn't be able to find a lot of people, period, who can. And so I take pride in that. You know, It's like a small victory, but I like it. Anyway, so I train heavy, but I also aim to recover as hard as I train. I do cold plunges, right? They say 11 minutes a week, um, less than or equal to 49 degrees Fahrenheit. Doesn't need to be much colder than 49 to get the same physiological benefit from the cold plunge. Now, psychologically, if you want to go colder because you're like, you think it being colder helps more, I think that there's definitely something to that. And you should definitely explore that. I've done 36-degree cold plunges. They are horribly cold. But you come out of it and you're like, man, I feel amazing. You have such a massive anti-inflammatory response when you cold plunge. Systemically, it's not just localized. And then you do it frequently enough and it has a compounding effect. I eat an organic diet, or as much of an organic diet as I can. I try to avoid all the chemicals and pesticides and herbicides and everything that people always talk about with diet, because I don't want to add inflammatory agents to my life if I can help it, right? Now, I kind of basically do what is like a 90-10 rule. 90% of the time I'm going to eat an organic like diet, but 10% of the time I will allow myself to have something that is not organic, right? Because if anything, it's wiggle room for the things that I can't control, right? But it also allows me a little bit of leeway to just kind of take a break from eating the same thing over and over again, which I don't mind. I love it. It's super good for me. It tastes very good. But sometimes you just want a donut. So I allow myself that wiggle room. And I think my results speak for themselves in that regard. I kind of go between periods of lifting really heavy, and then I have periods where I do a lot of volume, right? But the intensity is what is going to drive optimizing your muscles for growth, assuming you're giving them the correct fuel, right? Because exercising is not actually what builds muscle. Exercising is a vehicle for muscle growth. You basically tell your body, by way of destroying your muscles, this is where you need healing, right? So then you eat the protein, you eat the carbs and the fat and all that, and your body knows exactly where to go, because your body responds to inflammation for healing. It's an immune response, right? Muscle building is essentially that kind of thing. It's a type of immune response. You create inflammation at a site, right? You get that pump, you destroy that muscle, creates inflammation, which is what a pump is essentially. And your body says that's where we need to go. It follows that chemical signal, right? So then you grow, you get stronger, the muscle gets bigger, the muscle gets denser. But the most efficient way to recover, or the most efficient way to grow muscle, is to minimize the amount of energy needed other parts of your body, right? So if you're constantly blasting your muscles, then you're never efficiently healing. That's why sleep has such a huge healing effect, because your body can maximize energy usage. It can maximize growth because it's not having to blink. It's not having to, run your digestive system the same way as when you're awake. So you grow so much more in sleep. So if you mimic that during the day by not exercising for periods of time, really allowing yourself to recover from such intense workouts, you grow so much more. It seems counterintuitive, but it works. And I've done it for years. In fact, there were times where I was working out such high intensity for so long, I was having unresolved inflammation in my life. It was causing me to be hypertensive. It was affecting my sleep. It was affecting my testosterone. And then when I finally took breaks, I finally took weeks off, I finally took seriously this idea of recovery. I started really looking into adaptogens. I started really looking into cold plunging. My issues got fixed. My testosterone, my energy from my testosterone and my sleep got like amazingly better. My hypertension went away. Like I became normotensive, right? Because I thought I just got to train hard and I'm going to recover. I'm young, I'm whatever. But that's just not the case, because the more you neglect recovery, it compounds interest later. That inflammation that you're not allowing to be resolved is going to say, fine, we're just going to be inflamed, because this just needs to be normal for the sake of survival. It just needs to be normal for the sake of energy efficiency. But then you have to resolve that. One of the number one questions I get is, how do I naturally increase testosterone? Well, you got to look at your symptoms, right? Are you sleeping well? What is your general energy without stimulants? Is everything down yonder working? How's your appetite? Or how's your diet, period? Things like that. And so the first thing I tell people, fix your sleep. Because you can be a normal person without any risk factors and have terrible sleep, and it can drop your testosterone, at least acutely, right? It can affect your testosterone. So fix your sleep. And if you fix your sleep, you're sleeping 8 hours or whatever, and you're waking up feeling energized, feeling that, and like things are still, maybe your testosterone is still low, maybe it's your diet. Maybe you're getting inflammation elsewhere. And maybe you need to fix your diet. Maybe you need to eat less, or maybe you need to eat less frequently, because bloating is a sign of inflammation, and that will affect other aspects of your body, because everything in your body is synergistic. It works together. Not one thing acts alone. It is always acting with other things in your body, or other things are acting on it. And so if one thing is affected, it's affecting other things, right? So it's never as simple as just do one thing, just take one supplement, everything else would be fixed. It could be, but I'm saying most of the time it's not. Most of the time it's multifactorial. Most of the time you have to look at it synergistically. So I focus a lot on recovery. One thing I'm going to start doing. Hey guys, so I never actually explain what I'm going to do, because I'm kind of retarded. But basically, I'm going to have 1 week where I train very intensely, and then the next week I'm going to do way less intensity. That way I can maximize my recovery without overdoing it and not recovering properly. Anyway, back to your regularly scheduled program. And because I've been lifting for over a decade, and because I am as strong as I am, it's very easy for me to take that intensity super high. And it's very easy for my body to kind of hit that threshold where I need way more recovery. They actually did a study, and it showed, I don't have a link to the study, by the way. If you're asking, you find it. But they compared hypertrophy with short rest and hypertrophy with long rest, and which one is, I wouldn't say better, but which one is more efficient. And what they found is that people who rest shorter doing hypertrophy have to do more sets to get the same amount of stimulation of the muscle, to get the same amount of growth, versus people who rest longer don't have to do as many sets. Now, why? Well, because people who rest longer can do more weight at a higher intensity, versus if you rest shorter, you can't do as much weight and you can't be as intense, right? So it's actually better to give your body more time to recover so that you can have the same amount of intensity with your lifts, with your workouts, right? So I focus on recovery. I lift heavy. I lift for volume. Not every PR has to be a 1 rep max. Sometimes it's a 3 rep max. Sometimes it's increasing from a 4 to a 5 rep max or whatever, right? And that's how I look at all of my training. And then I also look to better myself, not just in the standard lifts, not just in the squat, the deadlift, the overhead, the bench. I also like to train like my weighted dips, to train them like I do a deadlift, to try to increase the overall weight that I can do. You know, everybody wants to slap on a 25 or one plate and they want to just do sets of 10. It's like, that's great. But when are you going to put on another plate or put on a plate, or when are you just going to increase the weight and try to get 5 reps, try to get 3 reps, you know, because all of that is going to benefit you. All of that is going to make you stronger. All of that is going to help you build muscle more. Anyway, all of that. I hope that makes sense. I know I tend to get tangential. I know I tend to ramble on about whatever sticks in my brain. I know I talked a lot about or a little bit about cold plunging. I know I talked a little bit about or mentioned taking adaptogens. If you want me to talk more about those things, especially in regards to what I do and how they work with my body, then let me know. You know, leave a comment, whatever. Anyway, all right.